Salutare tuturor! Mă bucur că ne revedem. N-am mai făcut de mult un live împreună și chiar am emoții, nu doar fiindcă nu ne-am mai văzut de mult, dar mai ales pentru că am o invitată specială astăzi. E vorba despre o autoare de cărți de parenting pe care eu o citesc de multă vreme. Se numește Sarah Ockwell Smith. Și de curând am adus în limba română una dintre cărțile ei, cred că este prima carte tradusă în limba română, care este cel de-al doilea copil și despre asta vom și discuta astăzi, despre când și cum ne hotărâm dacă mai vrem un copil, când e momentul potrivit, care e diferența de vârstă optimă între copiii noștri, cum putem face adaptarea cât mai ușoară la noua situație, cum îi dăm vestea copilului primului-născut despre cel de-al doilea și celui de-al doilea despre cel de-al treilea. Vorbim despre lucrurile cu care ne este nouă greu, despre lucrurile cu care le este lor greu și despre ce putem face în general să ne fie viața mai ușoară pe măsură ce devenim tot mai mulți. Without further ado, please welcome Sarah Ockwell Smith. Hi.
Hi.
It's very nice to see you. I will make an introduction of you in English because I think that's fair. So hear what I have to say about you. Okay, so Sarah is a pretty well-known parenting expert. You are also a popular childcare author. You have, I think, around 15 titles published. Is that correct?
Yes.
That sounds great. Congratulations. I am familiar with a few of them. I know that you are working on a title for parents of teens.
Yes.
We are so looking forward to that. And maybe at the end of our dialogue, you would like to share one idea or two from your new book. And hopefully we will have that in Romanian as well.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, we have this one, which is the second baby book. Now you are the mother of 4?
4? Yes.
Wow, you are very brave. Congratulations. And yeah, maybe you will share some, I don't know, tips and tricks for us. I only have 2 and sometimes it's too many. I don't know how my life would be with 4, but yeah, we'll get into that.
Okay.
You are the promoter of the gentle parenting, and I remember the first book I read from the ones that you wrote was the one about gentle sleep solutions. Mm-hmm. And I think it was one of the first books that I read that talked about the gentle approach and respectful ways to handle your child and how to think about him or her. And at that time, so many years ago, it was quite different from the parenting literature that was on the market then. I really appreciate this book. I worked in the editing team, so I got the chance to read it several times. And for me, as a parent of 2, with all the guilt sometimes and the frustration sometimes and their rivalry, this is a very hot topic. And I'm sure it is for many parents of several siblings. So maybe you will share with us some of your experience and tips and tricks about how to handle the first kid when the second one is on the way. Also about the rivalry and whatever you can share with us that can help us on the way would be amazing. I have some questions prepared for you. And if you're ready, let's
jump
in. Perfect. Okay, so I know you wrote this second baby book after the birth of your second child, which was several years ago, I believe. And now you have this hindsight over everything that you experienced then. Now there's a third child and the fourth. What do you think now, if you look back in time, really helped in your relationship with your kids and within their relationship? What are the things that help and what are the things that didn't help? So what could you have done differently in regards to this combination of parents and kids?
So I may answer some questions that you asked me later, but I think the reason that I wrote about having a second baby is there is so much information about having your first. And now there's more and more information over the last 2 or 3 years about matrescence, which is a word that describes the psychological journey of a woman becoming a mother. But this is all talking about for the first time. So we have lots of classes we can go to for the birth. And then we have new baby classes that we can go to. And now there's even more information to help us become a mother for the first time. And I think that people think because you've had a baby before, that when you're pregnant for the second time, that it's okay because you've done it before, you know what you're doing. But everything is so different. You don't have the time during the pregnancy that you had first time around to focus on the pregnancy. And I remember first time around, if somebody said to me, how many weeks pregnant are you, Sarah? I could say, I am 27 weeks and 2 days. And then they would say, oh, how big's the baby? And I'd be able to say, my baby is the size of an apple. But second time around, they would say, how pregnant are you? And I'd say, I don't know. 4 months, 5 months, something like that. How big's the baby? I don't know. And I remember first time around, I kept a scrapbook, a book where I put my pictures of my ultrasound scan, and I filled in, it had sort of, how were you feeling about having a baby? And I'd write that down. And then when my baby was born, we'd put pictures in. And the second time around, because you're so focused on your child, who is probably a toddler or a preschooler, quite young, so take up a lot of your time, you don't get to have that focus on the second pregnancy. And then when the baby's born, you also don't have that focus on them that you did the first time around. So it hit me that I couldn't do the same classes with my second born that I did with my first. But there isn't much information out there about having a second baby. Most importantly, how it makes you feel as a parent. And I felt incredibly guilty. I didn't feel that I was giving my eldest enough time, and I didn't feel that I was giving the baby enough time. And then I worried that I was doing things differently. You know, I didn't breastfeed my second for as long as I did my first. With my firstborn, I made all the food from scratch when I weaned him onto solids, and I didn't with the secondborn. And I know you asked me, how do you get your children to sort of get along well? But I think it's much simpler than that. I think it's, how do we cope better? Because when we cope better and we don't have all this guilt and this anxiety and this worry, everything is easier. So if you ask me about having a second baby, or how do I cope with my toddler having a tantrum, or how do I cope with my baby not sleeping, or how do I cope with my teenager being rude to me, my answer is always the same, in that it starts with us. And it starts with what we're thinking and feeling up here. And it starts with how we handle our own emotions. We cannot control how our children behave towards each other, but we can control how we think about it, and we can control how we act. So if you've got, say, a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old and they're fighting, we can't stop that because they're tiny, their brains aren't developed. But what we can do is we can take a deep breath and be calm. And I think for me, the emphasis throughout the whole of the book, and actually every book that I write, the emphasis is on us as a parent, the experience we have, the thoughts and the feelings we have, the lack of support in our society today. Because when we are in a good place, suddenly realize, you know, I don't have to control how my children be at.
Sarah, can you hear me? I think I lost you.
You dropped out. It's come back.
Okay, yeah, the image froze and I couldn't hear you, but no, yeah.
So, I mean, just to conclude, I think we have to understand that we cannot control how our children behave, but we can control how we behave. And that, for me, underpins every question you could ask me, whatever that question is. When we are feeling calm and when we are regulated in our emotions, we can deal with how our children behave. And it's normal, siblings fight. Toddlers don't much like a new baby arriving. If your children are, say, 8 and 11, they'll still fight. It's really common and normal for siblings to bicker, to fight, to argue, to have sibling rivalry. I think we just need to be more honest about that. As they get older, their relationship develops, but maybe they're not going to be best friends when they're young, and that's okay. It's all how we handle it. Which is probably not the answer that you wanted, but I think any parenting question I'm asked, it's always, how do I change my children? How do I control their behavior? How do I make my children do this? How do I get my children to do this?
I will
and the
not
more that
I know it's not the mindset.
But the more I work in parenting, it's the only thing we can control is ourselves.
Yeah, I agree with that. And as a parent of two who don't like each other, I can definitely say I have learned to trust their relationship. Of course, there are things that I will not let them do. And there are things that I will encourage them to do, and I will offer as much as of my time and disponibility I can so that they feel secure and loved. And then it's their thing, and I will just be there if they need me. I refuse to be the judge. I have another job, so I don't specialize in. Exactly. So that's what I always tell him. And they, Mom, he did that. She did. Well, I'm a journalist. I'm not a judge. If you want to judge, you may have to look for one on Google, but I will not get between you. But what I do know is that there are things that help, and there are things that definitely don't help in regards to how I intervene when they are mean to each other, because I will not let them. So I don't know what's your opinion about that, and I will ask you, of course. But for me, there are lines that we will not cross. I will not let them be mean to me. I understand you're angry. We can talk about that when we are calmer. But I will not let you call names or be hurtful. So you can fight, but within this this parameter of rules, right? How do you do it? So when your kids fight, what are your rules? What's the not cross line?
We would have a boundary of that it's not physical. So there's no hitting, biting, kicking. If there is, then I will step in and separate them. But verbally, it's quite tricky, because a child who is being rude or answering back or calling somebody names is really a child who's indicating to you that they're not coping, that they've got lots of big feelings and big emotions, and they can't verbalize them. They can't really get out how they feel. So they end up with just saying hurtful things. A lot of adults still do this. And I think the key thing is, yes, you can say, we have to be polite to each other, but you have to look at what the underlying reason is. So it's very common for siblings to not get on. They'll be in close proximity to each other. They'll have to share toys. They share their parents' time. And very often it takes until they're older for them to really form a friendship. But I think what we can look at is what is happening in the individual world of that child that means they are really struggling to stay calm. So if they are constantly hitting out or swearing or cursing or calling names, that to me is a sign that there's something really not right with that child. And just to say, don't talk like that, I won't allow you to talk like that, doesn't resolve the problem. So if I do have one child who's perhaps more rude or more violent or saying more hurtful things, then I would see that as a sign that I need to spend more time with that child, more one-to-one time, and to work out what's going on for them. So very often they will bring, if they say, for instance, at school, they will, if they're going through something difficult at school, maybe a friendship issue, maybe they're struggling with the work at school, they will bring those bottled up emotions home, and often they will release them at their siblings. So just saying, don't hit, don't say that, be kind, be respectful, doesn't resolve the underlying problem. So yes, I would have a boundary that we don't hit, and yes, we'd have a boundary that we should be polite to each other, but it has to go deeper. If you have a child who's constantly dysregulated, you have to find out why and work with that.
Well, sometimes his problem is the existence of his brother, and that's something that we cannot solve.
Yeah.
Or sometimes the behavior is not very out there, so it's not bad words or bad behavior. It's just a passive aggressive look sometimes, or just an annoyed, especially when they grow older and they get wiser, and they can be hurtful without being loud or obeying all the rules, but still being constantly annoyed that his brother or sister exists.
There's always something else. They're not just, if you think about adults, if you think about, so if you work with somebody and they're not very nice and they're giving you looks or they're being rude, they're not a horrible person. Maybe you don't, you're not the greatest friends, but if an adult is being like that, they're always going through something. There's always something else. So I don't believe that a child who is constantly giving their sibling bad looks or constantly being angry or frustrated or irritated by them, that child is not doing it deliberately. And there's normally something else happening. So for instance, if they get very irritated when their sibling makes a lot of noise or makes a lot of mess, one thing I would be mindful of is what is underlying that. Could there be neurodivergence? Could they be struggling because they're slightly on the autistic spectrum and the noise is too much for them from a sensory perspective? So I'm always asking why. I don't look at behavior at face value. When I deal with behavior, whatever behavior it is, I always say there are three things we have to think about. And I imagine it as the shape of a tree. So we are the center, the trunk. And then we have one branch here and one branch here. So we as the center of the tree, we are the most important. So we have to think about, how am I behaving? Have I not been giving them enough individual attention lately? Have I been having an argument with their dad or my, another partner, and they've picked up on that tension and that stress? Have I not been coping very well when they argue? Have I been shouting at them? And that will make things worse. So we have to always think about, what am I role modeling? What am I teaching my children here? And then we have to think about what I call the short-term discipline or the emergency discipline, which is what you've been talking about. So when I have two siblings who are fighting, I think about, what can I do right now to stop this? So right now it would be, right, guys, I can see two children who are being very rude to each other and I can't let that happen. So we're going to go into two different rooms. Or if they're hitting each other, then I'm going to go and say, I won't allow you to hit each other. We have to separate and go into different places. But that's not dealing with anything underlying. That's just short term, or it's what I call here firefighting. So you're putting the flames out. You're constantly putting the flames out, but you're never saying, but why does it keep catching alight? Why does the fire keep starting? So the other branch that I talk about is the long-term discipline. And that's the, why does this keep happening? Why, when I say to them, we don't hit each other, we're not rude, we're respectful in this house. When I keep saying that, why does it not make a difference? Why do they keep doing it? One of the whys is because they're children and their brains aren't as developed as ours and they can't control their emotions as much as ours. But there are a lot of other things as well. Is one of them struggling at school? Is one of them not feeling very well? Is there an underlying neurodivergence? Is one of them taking up more of my time for whatever reason? And a child who is misbehaving will often get more of their parents' time, which can leave the other child feeling very left out. Or maybe your older one has started school and your focus is on that and the younger one's feeling left out. Or maybe the older one sleeps through the night and the younger one still sleeps with you and the older one feels left out at night time. But there's always something on this long-term branch. So we have to think about, me as a role model, what am I showing them? How am I speaking? How is that affecting them? How do I have relationships with other people? When I fight with my partner or their dad, what do I show them about how to handle conflict with others? And then we've got the, how do we cope with it in the moment, the firefighting? How do I stop it? But that's not going to look at why it keeps happening. And then we've got the why. Everything has to have that why, as well as what we're role modeling. And the difficulty thing is there as well. We have to be realistic with our expectations, and we have to understand we could be the best parent in the world. We could ask why 1,000 times. We could be the perfect gentle parent when it happens, but it is going to still keep happening because they're really young and they can't deal with emotions and conflict in the way that we can as adults. So we have to readjust our expectations and think, actually, when you see families on the TV or in films and they're all getting along and hugging and polite and kind to each other, or maybe somebody you follow on Instagram and their children are always hugging and kissing each other and nobody's ever angry, that's not real life. You know, real life is messy. People argue, people are rude, siblings fight. The thing is, we see our families for what really happens, and we see everybody else's family with what they choose to show of us or what happens in fiction on TV and film. So we've got to be realistic and think, you know, it's really common and normal for siblings to not get on. And actually, we know there is research to show that siblings who fight actually end up more emotionally mature as adults. They have easier relationships with not just their sibling, but with romantic partners, with work colleagues, because they've learned how to handle conflict at a young age. So actually, these fights are really helpful as long as nobody gets hurt. And I think the expectations of like, this is real life. Real life is not what people show you on Instagram reels or on TV shows. It's not perfect. It is messy and involves a lot of emotions. And being realistic about what we can achieve is so important.
Yes, I totally agree. And but yeah, it's hard, especially if the mother is the one always in the front line.
Yeah.
With 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 kids. I don't know how things are around you, but here in Romania, we have a 2-year maternity leave.
Mm-hmm.
So most mothers tend to leave work and stay home for 2 years.
Right.
And then probably they will be pregnant with the second one.
Yeah.
So they will be just by themselves at home, cleaning, cooking, taking care of 1 kid or 2 or 3 while the man is out at work. Most families are pretty insular, so we go away from our parents. There is no help, no grandmas, no mothers, no aunties ready to help. So it's just us with the kids clinging, and you miss your friends, you miss your job, you do things that you don't really enjoy. You just have to do them because you have responsibilities and you are you need to take care of everything in your life.
It's the same in the UK. In England, it's the same, except actually it's worse. We only have 9 months off. So, and I know a lot of people think actually it would be easier if I go back to work, but then you're going back to work when your baby is not sleeping, when they're tiny, when they're going through separation anxiety, when they're not ready to be away from you, you're probably not ready to be away from them. But we have the same, we don't have any support. Our government is not supportive of families financially. People are not raising children amongst extended families. So as you said, there's no grandmothers and aunts or anybody. We're all alone. And it's really hard. There is no answer to that, unfortunately. You know, the answer people say is, oh, you've got to build a village. But that's really difficult when you're exhausted and you've got children not fighting or toddlers having a tantrum and a baby not sleeping. I think the one thing that I can suggest there is you need to find people similar to you who think the same way and share parenting styles. And probably you're going to find them online. So to find a group of parents in Romania who parent similarly to you, or maybe you have a group of parents who live in a local area to you. But we're really lucky that we have the internet to connect now. I think that can be really helpful. It can also be quite difficult because we have to remember we don't see what's really happening online, but making those connections where you feel that you can speak. I think the most important thing is we shouldn't feel that we have to be positive about parenting all the time. We should have somewhere we can go and just say, I found it so difficult today. I've hated today. You know, anybody else feel the same? You know, this week or this month has just been awful. And we need to have somewhere we can go and have a really good moan. But I think, unfortunately, it has to be virtual because it's so unlikely that it will be in person anymore.
I agree.
For me, with second babies, speaking to other people who had another baby recently, who were like, yeah, it's really hard, isn't it? I'm really struggling, helped me so much because it made me think, oh, it's not just me. It's not just me that's the problem. Other people struggle too. So that just connecting online is key. To be honest, more than anything I could say to you or anything I could say in a book is to connect with other people who are going through similar.
I'm curious, was it easier with the third and the fourth one than with the second?
So I found the hardest transition 1 to 2. So first time around, I didn't know what to expect. I didn't grow up around people having babies. So I I just thought babies cry all the time and it's going to be really hard work. And I was so pessimistic about having a baby that I was actually quite shocked. Oh, they do sleep a bit more than I thought. And actually it's a little bit easier. So I think it was quite weird that I went into it with such low expectations. So, and I actually really enjoyed having having time to bond with him at home and do stuff with him. But 1 to 2, I found really hard, not necessarily practically. Like, obviously it is harder when you're trying to get a baby and an older child dressed and out of the door, and you know, it's double the work, but you don't normally have double the hands. It's still just you as one person. So I found the practical side of it difficult, but the emotional side of it I found the hardest. The feeling of I'm not doing this the same for the second as I did my first. And then also when the first was struggling, thinking, what have I done? He was really happy before the baby came along. So that I found really hard. 2 to 3 and 3 to 4, I found so easy because you'd already adjusted to the physical side of things. You're already exhausted. You can't really get more exhausted. But then you've got over the emotional side of things as well. And I found that I only went through that once with 1 to 2, not 2 to 3 and 3 to 4. So, I mean, I wouldn't say easy because obviously there's a lot more work involved, but so much easier. So definitely 1 to 2, which is why I wrote the second baby book and not the third or the fourth. You know, people have said to me, can you write a book about having a large family? And I don't think I would say very much different than I said in there. It's about organizing yourself practically, but also working on what's in your mind. But yeah, if anyone's listening pregnant with the third or fourth, it's so much easier. And the births were a lot easier as well, which is everything was easier. And I think also you're a little bit more mature as well. You're just that little bit older and more experienced.
And maybe you get to enjoy more all the steps, because at the first you are so, what the hell is going on? Every day it's something new. I remember my husband saying after our first daughter was, I don't know, a few months, and he was like so tired by every day a new problem. First she's vomiting, then she's farting, then the poop is weird, then why isn't she sleeping? Why is she sleeping so much? And everything every day was different, so exhausting. And then with the second one, I was busy with the first one. I actually got to enjoy a bit more the pregnancy and the first months, but it was so exhausting that I don't even, it's lucky for me that I wrote some things and now I read them and I don't remember anything. It's less. So the first years with both of them being small, like 1 year and 3 and 2 and 4, and I don't remember almost anything. So my brain was just, so maybe with the next ones, if you are into big families, you really get to, I don't know, enjoy like in the movies or in the poems.
Oh, I don't know. I mean, there's still lots of fighting and parents doing things wrong and slipping up and yelling and bad days, but it's just a lot easier to cope with.
I understand.
I think the worst thing, I think, is my youngest, my fourth, always complains like, where are my baby pictures? And I say, we were so busy. I'm so sorry we don't have lots of baby pictures of you. The first one, we took them to a professional photographer and had the photos. And then when my second born was we did the same thing, had a professional photo. And then gradually with each child, you have a less and less because you don't have any space on the walls, and you don't have any money, and you don't have the time. So I think we have one baby photo of my last child. one framed, and that's it.
Well, advantages and disadvantages of being number one and number four, and okay. Can we get back a bit to the second baby? I know you have written this in the book, but maybe there are people watching who haven't read it yet. So what is, according to the studies and to your opinion, of course, the optimal, let's say, age difference between the kids so that it's easier for them and for the parents?
Gosh, so I'm going to answer this in two ways. Honestly, I don't think there is such a thing. I think there are pros and cons of every age gap. If we look at the science of what's healthiest for everybody, so that's the mum, the firstborn and the secondborn, then we're looking probably at around about 4 years. So it allows the mum's body to replenish and get all the vitamins back up after the birth. So you've healed. And then for the baby, that's healthier for the baby because there's less risk of something like preeclampsia happening because the body is less depleted. And then for the older child, it's better for them because they've had more one-to-one time with you. Those first 3 years, they've had you all to themselves, and they're probably settled at preschool, school, or nursery, which allows you then to focus fully on the second baby. So they've both had those first 3 or 4 years with you. What I do find, though, with bigger age gaps like that is there can often be more jealousy from the firstborn because they've had that time with you and they struggle a little bit to adapt because they remember that time with you. Whereas I have very tiny age gaps, which are not good, apparently, according to science. Not good for me because my body's very depleted and didn't have a chance to heal. Not good for the babies from a physical sense. And also for the older child, they've had way less time with you. So if you look at research, they would say something like, could even be that your firstborn has a lower IQ because they've had less one-to-one time with you. But for me, the beauty of having small age gaps was that there wasn't a huge amount of sibling rivalry or jealousy when they were young because they didn't really remember being alone because they were so little. And also for me, it was, we got all of the sleepless nights out of the way within a 2 or 3 year period. And we didn't have, we had nappies and a pram or cots or all of the equipment only for 2 or 3 years, and then we moved on, and my children have kind of grown up similar ages, so similar interests. But when they're older, that is much harder. So having 4 teenagers all born within 3.5, 4 years of each other has been very difficult. So I genuinely do not believe there is a best and a worst, and a lot of people can't control it. So you get pregnant accidentally, you plan an age gap, and then you have secondary infertility. Or maybe you already know that you need to have IVF. Or maybe a relationship has broken down and you're going to have a family with a new partner. Fate decides for us. And I think whatever the age gap is, I think focusing less on what the best is and what the science says and more on, this is your family and it's just going to be perfect for your family. There'll be positives, there'll be negatives, but you'll deal with them. I think it's a much healthier way to look at it.
I agree. Thank you. what is your policy about sharing, especially when the kids are young?
Mhm.
Do we make the older one share? Do we wait for him to share?
Yeah.
Do we have toys to share and toys that are only yours and those are only yours? What can we do to, just soothe this
Yeah.
rivalry regarding objects?
So sharing is a developmental stage. It's not something you can force children to do or necessarily teach them to do. It comes in as their brains develop and they have a sense of empathy, an understanding of how others think and feel. So if you're trying to make them share or discipline them to share, it's a little bit of a waste of time. It's something that they will do naturally when people have been kind and sort of shared, including adults, with them. So it's not something I've ever really enforced. What I do is actually would help the children to protect their belongings. So if my firstborn had a toy that was precious to them and they didn't want to share it, I would not make them share it. And I think that surprises a lot of people. I would say, okay, well, we'll keep that safe in your room and that's just your toy. And then what I might have is bigger toys that are in the living room of my house. That would be a family toy that doesn't belong to anybody, and that will be everybody can use that. So it's the rather than forcing them to share, allowing them to not share, which is quite mind blowing, but often our obsession with forcing children to share actually can cause some sibling rivalry, particularly with the older one, because they feel that the younger one's having to touch all of their stuff. And that can make them very stressed, very distressed, and can cause a lot of problems. So no, I don't force sharing. And if there was a toy that I knew that would cause a problem and it was cheaper, I would get two of them and they would have one each.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel for the firstborn. I was at an event a few weeks ago, and the mother was asking me what to do when her first son talks bad to his sister, saying, "Don't touch my stuff. You always ruin everything." And
Yeah, but
she
that's
asked me,
true.
what can I, and I said, well, he is right not to want his sister to touch his things. He has
Mm.
this right. He's already sharing you. And the boy was in the room, but I didn't know that at the time. And he started clapping and he said, "Hey." And he said, "Thank you, lady. That's exactly what I'm trying to explain to my mother, but she
Yeah,
will not believe me. But now that you are saying so, yeah, because I am an only
yeah,
child, but I have talked a lot with my daughter. She's our oldest, and I know how important it is for her to have her own universe, and
yeah.
that's only
And for
hers.
us as parents to protect them as well.
Yeah,
If they have a
exactly.
younger sibling grabbing things or toddling over and touching their stuff, you'd say, no, that belongs to your brother or your
Hmm.
sister, that's not
Hmm.
yours.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, yeah, I agree. So except for a one-to-one time and trying to be centered and calm, are there any things that we can do to help them
Mhm.
give each other a chance, especially if they are one of those pair of siblings that really like to, sting each other? Is there anything that we can help with, or just, leave them build
I
their
think
own?
it depends on their age, doesn't it? If they're very little, not really very much.
Mhm.
We can just be there and make sure that they don't hurt each other, protect their things if they're struggling with
Mhm.
sharing. If they're older, then I would very much focus on communication skills. So, if your brother or your sister is doing something you don't like, what can you say or do to stop it
Mm.
rather than launching in and hitting them or something? I would teach them to say, stop, I don't like that, or help them to focus on collaborating to find a joint solution. So there are games that you can play that you're working as a team, and just so that helps them to get more into working as a team and understanding each other rather than always working against each other. So I don't know what you would call them in Romania, but in the UK we call them collaborative board games.
Yeah, we have them too. Hmm.
Yeah, so that really helps so that they're working with their
Together.
sibling, and that just
Hmm.
on the communication perspective. But I think if you're talking how do you help, say, if you're still pregnant, how would you prepare your firstborn to make it as easy as possible? The thing that I focus on is preparing practically, but also thinking about, we might read lots of books about having a new baby and we might watch a TV program, but we have to understand that young children think very differently to us, and they don't really understand the concept of time, and they don't understand abstract things. So although they understand they have a new baby brother or sister coming, they haven't really grasped how that will affect their life. So I think we have to just focus on preparing practically. So by that, I mean literally getting everything organized beforehand, having a run through of what will happen with childcare when you go into labor. So if, say, grandparents are going to have your firstborn, actually having a practice sleepover. Make sure that you get all the baby bits out well in advance of the baby arriving, so the firstborn thinks they're a bit boring because they've had to play with them already. So there's a lot in the book that talks about preparing practically, but then also realizing that any preparation you do emotionally will have a limited effect because they don't understand the same sort of hypothetical thought and abstract thought processes that we do. So although they're very excited about a new baby coming when you're pregnant because they've read the book, they may not be when the baby arrives. Or quite often something that will happen is, if things will go very well initially, and you'll find 6, 9 or 12 months down the line that all of a sudden they don't want their sibling anymore, and they're like, can we send them back? Or they start the sort of the bad behavior starts to come in then, because again it comes down to the concept of time and not understanding, well, this is it, they're here to stay. So I think just definitely do lots of preparation, but just to be informed about the sort of impact it might have, rather than think, oh, but I did that, you should be fine, or why did that not work? So they just think so differently to us. So be prepared for surprises.
Lots of parents, especially mothers, are very, let's say, disappointed and hurt when their firstborn starts acting out exactly like you said after a few months. But he loves the baby, he kisses the baby, but he doesn't want to go to nursery anymore, or he shouts, he screams, he wets his bed, he will not have regular food, he wants to be breastfed. So it's like this regression of the first child wanting to get everything that the second one does. And sometimes you can give that to him for a while just to play about it. Okay, let's help you remember how it was when you were a baby. Look at these pictures, look at these movies. I held you exactly the same way and I can still do it now. But are there any things that we can do to help the first one to adjust better? Because of course we did everything to prepare, but as you said, it's not going very well, and that's totally normal. It's a new reality that he doesn't enjoy probably most of the times. He wants things to go back, but that's impossible, and he's still in his magical years. He hopes that if he does this or this, the baby will disappear and he will have his parents back. Of course, that cannot happen. So, what can we do more?
To be honest, it's, apart from what you've said, it's just time. It's understanding what they're going through. So not seeing them as being jealous or naughty, realizing what a huge transition it is for them, and that they're kind of grieving the relationship that they had with you. They're confused, they're sad, they're frustrated. They've got all these big feelings that their brain is not developed enough to cope with yet. And what they need from you is just a whole heap more time, patience, and love. I mean, so there are little things you can do with the sort of things you said, and talking with them about, yes, I miss the time we had just us, and it's sad when the baby cries and we can't do what we used to do. You know, I'm looking forward to Saturday when I have an hour with you when you're out with auntie, daddy, or whoever. But ultimately, that's just going to take the edge off a little bit. It's not going to have a huge difference. The only thing that makes a huge difference is time. And to understand that doesn't change things or necessarily make it better, but it makes it easier because you know there's nothing wrong with your child, there's nothing wrong with you. It's normal. It will pass, like any difficulties you've had in parenting. It just often takes a lot longer than people think.
Unfortunately, yes. Okay, so there is light there. You have 4 and they are grown up now. So you survived this. Probably we will too. Most of
Yeah.
us, at least. Can you give us, I don't know, a small preview from the ideas that you present in the book about teens? I'm just curious.
Yeah, actually, almost everything I say is the basis is the same. So it comes down to who we are, how we control our emotions, how we listen and support. So one of the things that we will do to children as they get older, as a society, when we discipline them, we tend to punish them. We tend to think, I must make them feel bad so they don't want to do that again. Or we will reward them and we'll say, if I make them feel better, if they don't do that, they'll keep doing the good behavior. And what we do is then we raise children who are afraid to really be themselves with us. What we do when we raise them with lots of punishment or lots of bribes and rewards is they hold all of these feelings in. And then they get to their teenage years and we say, my teen doesn't talk to me. I can't get them to open up. You know, what's wrong? Their behavior is difficult, but they just won't talk to me. And I think the thing is, if you're listening with younger children, is if we can avoid that, and if we teach our children from the very beginning, you can always tell me when you're struggling with something. I'm not going to label you naughty or manipulative. I'm not going to think you're doing it deliberately. I'm going to see a child who has a problem, and together we're going to work through that problem together. You know, why are you feeling like this? I understand you're not feeling good. Let's work through it together. And if you raise them like that from the beginning, it's 100,000 times easier when they're teenagers, because when they're struggling with something, they come to you and they say, Mum, I need to talk to you about something. And my eldest, who's now almost 22, says to me, it's so weird, Mum, my friends don't talk to their mums about anything. You know, their parents have no idea what's going on with them, the bad stuff that's happening with relationships or at college or university. They just don't talk to their parents. They say I'm really weird because I tell you everything. But from the beginning, we've been very open about feelings, and I've tried to avoid punishment so that they know that there's nothing really they can't talk to me about. And I think that is the key, that avoiding punishing, avoiding being authoritarian or very strict with your parenting it won't make things easier when they're younger. I have to be honest. You know, everything I say in my books, any of my books now, it's really hard raising young children. They will still not sleep through the night. They will still tantrum. They will still fight with their siblings. The style of parenting I'm talking about is in it for the long haul. So I'm not trying to make a 2-year-old who never has tantrums. I'm trying to raise a 20-year-old who can talk about their emotions. And the nice thing about the teenage years is it comes to fruition. You get to finally reap what you sowed 20 years earlier, which is really nice. So I think hopefully my best tip would be, if you do it right from the very beginning, you won't have difficulties when they're in their teenage years. And what you'll find is all the people you knew who were very strict and their children didn't tantrum and their siblings didn't fight because otherwise they were disciplined, I can almost guarantee you they'll have it difficult in the teen years, because those teenagers will not open up about anything. They learn to bury their feelings. But if we're accepting of feelings, we don't have to accept all difficult behavior. You know, we don't have to accept that they hurt a sibling, but we have to accept their emotions. That makes everything easier. So yeah, there's a lot on that, and a lot on what if you didn't do that, or what if, as you said, the world around us is so difficult. You know, the economy is really hard. Nobody has any money. Everyone's going to war. There's climate change. All the stuff around us. It's so hard being a parent today. You know, we're the only generation that's gone through a global pandemic with COVID. Nobody knew what they were doing, and we had to get up and carry on. And I think it is really bloody hard being a parent. I think ultimately we've got to be kinder on ourselves. and work on to try and be calmer and kinder, it starts with how we treat ourselves and our expectations of ourselves, and that has a huge impact when you've got teenagers. We can, as I said, we can't control our children, we can control ourselves, whatever age they are.
Thank you for your time. I'm very on the same page with you, and I'm glad that people following me and the publishing house can hear a new voice, new for us, of course.
Yeah.
Sharing the same message that we have been trying to pass on for years. We will watch every title that comes from you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Hang in there and keep sending us messages from the future, because we need to know that sometimes we doubt ourselves, because the majority of parents still are with the punishment and the physical hitting, and we are still the weird ones. But I hope in 1 or 2 generations things will change. But it's difficult, because you are being judged a lot for not making your child shut up, not imposing things to him, and it's like, this new generation will get in your head, and they will I think they will change the world, and I trust that most of the times. But there are tiny seconds when I'm like,
it comes back to surrounding yourself with the right people.
We try.
Make a community online of people that think like you.
We do, and we are like 200,000 now. But still, we are far from being the critical mass. So sometimes it can be, but I'm sure we're on the right track. And thank you for confirming this to us. We are waiting for your new book. Meanwhile, we have this one on the second baby. So follow Sarah online, and we'll be in touch. Thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye. Bye-bye. Have a nice evening. Bye.
Bye. Okay, is that all right?